Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Mortal Kombat 2021. Reasonably in this film, this iteration, they kind of are really pushing the fact that, oh, we're going to make a sequel to this movie. Yeah, with 80% of the movie being in utter darkness, so you can't really tell what the heck is going on in this movie because CGI. Because CGI. We're back to Bryan Cranston's, hey, yeah, considering our CGI just sucks, we have to now, and we don't want to put enough money into this movie to make our CGI look good. We have to do the darkness move where people can't exactly tell what everything is going on. Thumbs up! Thumbs up, Warner Brothers, for you again trying to make yet another movie less important by putting it in the pitch black darkness through 80% of the film, and then also making important characters, of course, not speak English because heaven forbid that. Like, you have to have, I guess, authenticity in this movie. Really, to me, when looking at this film kind of reeks of like a Power Rangers reboot kind of style and kind of approach, which here's also the thing that Power Rangers reboot movie actually had a good story that actually made sense. This movie is just kind of whatever it needs to be to seem different, and that doesn't equal to good different. We have it uh, to where this movie also kind of like, hey man, that Scorpion's Revenge animated thing, like people really loved that. So how about we steal a little bit of that to infuse that into this movie because people would not have seen that and are coming into this. Basically, like, go ahead and watch Scorpion's Revenge before you go ahead and watch this movie, and you'll make those comparisons as well. And Scorpion's Revenge, lot better movie, has the right character in it, which we don't have in this movie. Really, uh, really, the whole thing about this movie is we end up having characters that uh, need the real Power Rangers treatment, where like a lot of these people that are to be chosen a tournament, let's just say, are people that reasonably need to really be special. They can't just be, oh well, like every single one of them just have to just be able to fight even better than anyone else. No, there needs to be something even more on top of that, that gives them the advantage or the edge or whatever. And I just was like, oh, okay, so they're trying to be as vastly different of anything that came movie wise uh, from this before. But that doesn't mean it's good. That doesn't mean at all it's good. Reasonably, some people could enjoy this movie. Some people could go through this film and be like, wow, I liked what they did with this character. Oh, like, this is a smart decision. This is a smart move. Writing wise, this is really, really cool. Some people could enjoy this movie. Some people could be saying, like, oh, well, story wise, I think these were better choices, and so on and so forth. But to me, I could also say that reasonably, I was just disappointed in this film because I have seen the original Mortal Kombat movies. I've seen Scorpion's Revenge. I have seen even the Mortal Kombat animated series when that came out, and recently that was a real long time ago. Like, I should go and rewatch that just to see like what that was like because it's been such a long time. going into this movie, there is an obvious thing that a lot of people are griping on immediately when they're watching this movie. It's like, well, my character isn't there. Why isn't my character there that I like, that I think would be really have been fun in this movie? And it's just like, well, there's a reason for that. Like they were trying to reinvent this wheel within this movie. They were trying to like go like, well, like I think we should have this person in this film, and I think this person should be done differently, and I think there should be a build up, and blah 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 blah. So with that said, in my head, I was like, well, good attempt, Mortal Kombat, but when looking at it, I'm never going to care about a Street Fighter or a Mortal Kombat movie ever again. Unless it's an animated thing. An animated thing will actually look amazing, or a game will look amazing. But as far as a movie based on a video game, it's kind of pretty obvious that it's just a cash grab thing, and they're not trying to like make anything better than what had previously happened before. To where like everybody's gonna be like, man, I'm just gonna go back and watch the original movie because I thought the original movie was great, which will get people to go and find the original Mortal Kombat movies and watch the heck out of those. I'm sure with this new Mortal Kombat release, they're going and doing oh, well, we need to do a Blu-ray release on the original Mortal Kombat things, and that's how they'll make their money. Because people will look back at those rather than this new product, which I would admittedly say to do, because this is Power Rangers 2017, and it's not exactly as good as that movie. So, let's go into spoilers about this movie, because at the end of the day, it's time to say that spoiler time, it's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, spoilers now. So, here's the thing. We don't have Johnny Cage in this film. Really, Johnny Cage is to be teased by the tail end of this movie, which immediately I groaned about that because I'm like, oh, okay, so in other words, they realized that they're going to try to milk this out and try to get the real character that people actually want in the sequel movie, because everybody wanted Johnny Cage in this film because they killed him off in the second movie of Annihilation, which is probably to a lot of people like, yeah, that movie was god awful, and like the thing that they were missing was Johnny Cage the whole time. But anyways, because that was the best thing about the first original Mortal Kombat movie. So yeah, no Johnny Cage throughout this film isn't that great. But we're supposed to be tied to a guy named Cole Young, who, I'm sorry, but I'm not very familiar with Mortal Kombat all that much. He's probably just some character that they just added in fairly recently, and now you're supposed to care about him. Great. Liu Kang is basically just like if you want to call him the Power Rangers 2017, like he's basically the alpha of this scenario where he ends up greeting Sonya, Cole Young, and Kano, and he is to like usher them into Raiden's temple. Sure. So let's backtrack a little, and let's go into the very beginning of this film. So, reasonably, in the very beginning here, we end up having to set up this Cole Young as a cage fighter that it seems that he is rigging his fights, I guess, to I guess just kind of get money and so on and so forth. So Cole Young, we end up finding out, has some birthmark to tell us that he is going to be the champion of Earth. I guess that's how they retcon and that's how they change it to just be like, oh, well, whoever has a mark has to be the champion for Earth. To where we find out, like, Sonya doesn't have a mark on her, but, like, she's gonna earn her mark anyways. This, whatever in this movie. So, we end up having Cole Young doing his cage fighting because, like, if anything, the beginning of this movie really goes into Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and if you've ever seen Scorpion's Revenge, like, it's a copy and paste from that. We end up having Scorpion going with his family to just be like, oh, hey, yeah, like, we're going to have a great day. And then Scorpion ends up going off to go and do some activity, and Sub-Zero ends up going and killing Scorpion's family, all but his child, his baby. And so we end up having Scorpion going to fight off Sub-Zero, and of course Sub-Zero ends up killing Scorpion. And all of this transaction is all in a different language, so thumbs up to that. I guess, like, it should be like, no, well, yeah, so what? So a portion of this movie isn't in English. Whatever. You can't win it all. So we have it to where eventually Rainen scoops up this baby and ends up having him just go into the ether of things, which eventually is Cole Young. Eventually. Because years have passed since that time. And eventually we find out that Scorpion, of course, is in hell trying to figure out a way to get back to fight off Sub-Zero. And of course, if you watch Scorpion's Revenge, basically you get a whole play out of that whole scenario, which is way better than what doesn't get shown in this movie. So, man, am I just really digging into this movie, just going like, yeah, this isn't that good. This isn't that good. So on and so forth. So, moving on. So, cage fighter Cole Young ends up losing his fight. And so we end up finding out that the main villain, which is Shang Tsung, because of course, if you guys remember the Shang Tsung that was much more intimidating in the first Mortal Kombat movie, Shang Tsung in this movie is a boatload of who cares, to be brutally honest. Like, this guy isn't selling you on, like, the main reason why this, like, the Shang Tsung in the original movie, intimidating as F. This guy is just, like, he is a very just performance. Like, nothing about it, like, really goes, like, yeah, there's a reason why they cast this guy as being this main villain. As well as, honestly, like, the guy who plays Lord Raiden in this movie, I wasn't impressed by him either, because reasonably, I wasn't impressed by any of these actors. Nobody was really giving everybody was giving, like, a severely wooden performance through a bulk of this movie, besides maybe Nathan Jones, which he plays a character called, God, what is his name in this movie? I know he's in here. I don't know where he is, but he's surefire enough in this movie. Oh, Rico. It doesn't matter. He's a big, bald guy, and you can't miss him. But anyways, going on in this movie, so we have Shang Tsung who tells, hey, Sub-Zero, go and kill off all of our Earth champions, because we want all the Earth champions to die before they even get to the tournament. So here's the thing. So they aren't even doing the tournament in this movie. They're just trying to kill one another off before they even get to the tournament part. From what I've seen in this movie, so like everybody's to gear up for a tournament that doesn't even exist in this film until I'm assuming the sequel and then tournament. So whatever with this film. So we have Sub-Zero going after Cole Young, and so while that is going on, we have Jax who goes and finds Cole Young and is like, "Well, hey, like I've just been searching for this Cole Young guy, and it seems like he has a very interesting tattoo. Where did he get the tattoo from?" And a family member of Cole Young says, "Oh, it's his birthmark," and he's like, "Ah, nice." So we we end up having it to where Sub-Zero goes and is making Cole Young's environment snow, and so Cole Young has to look out the window and says, "Hey man, it's snowing outside. Isn't that weird?" And so we have to where Jax runs to retrieve Cole Young, and they drive away as fast as humanly possible to say like, "Hey guy, you're chosen as a contestant of Mortal Kombat because of the mark that you have." And Cole Young is like, "Say what now?" And like, "Well, hey, like Sonya Blade will explain it later. Like, believe me, like I'm just telling you now that you're the chosen one because you just are." And so we end up having Jax telling Cole Young where to go because now Jax has to go and fight out Sub-Zero because he thinks that he's just going to win because of his 4 tours in military, so or whatever, and so he just thinks that he can just outsmart a Sub-Zero character, which I just laugh at because it's like, dude, he has no superpowers, he doesn't have any abilities besides the ability of losing his arms consistently. That's his ability that he has, I guess. So we end up having Cole Young going to Sonya Blaze, where Sonya Blaze is going to run down this whole entire thing because she knows everything about Mortal Kombat, and Sonya Blade has Kano with her because like tied up into some chair because Sonya had been trying to do this one mission where it seems that Kano had gotten there first, and so we had it to where Sonya ended up tying up Kano to say like, well, he's also marked, so like now we have to like try and get all these champions together. So we end up having Jax going and fighting out Sub-Zero, and of course, like Sub-Zero just freezes Jax's arms, breaks them off, and we end up finding out sometime later that it seems like uh, Liu Kang had retrieved Jax to find a way through some realm or whatever to heal Jax, which eventually gives him the metal arms in this movie, which eventually makes him to be, I guess, a champion in this movie, I guess. So, moving on. So, we have it to where Shang Tsung sends Reptile out to fight off Sonya, Kano, and Cole Young. And so we have Reptile, or who I think is Reptile, maybe his name is different, but he ends up actually turning into a real legitimate lizard, which you can't really see because darkness, because CGI in movies like this sucks. So we have Reptile turning into a real lizard, and this lizard, of course, does the classic thing where he has to have that long tongue being tossed out, and so we end up having it to where this reptile gets bursted into flame, and it ends up burning. The reptile ends up purposely burning all of the research of Sonya's in her home, and but then eventually they end up killing said reptile, and Kano ends up killing the reptile, and he's like, Kano wins, ha ha ha. So we end up having it to where Kano ends up getting like scratched in the eye, uh, or in the face, by this reptile, and so to really showcase to us that eventually, like, Kano is eventually going to get that one eye thing that he always is used to getting. Uh, but here's the goofy thing. We end up finding out that every single one of these champions all get this magically special ability that they have to go and, like, they have to basically all learn how to morph, so to speak. So we end up finding out that Sonya, Kano, and Cole Young are going to Raiden's temple now because they feel like they need to go there now. And so they're going their way through this sand and desert and whatever to eventually find Raiden's temple, because I guess they knew where it was all along, but they just really needed to just go there now. Uh, we end up having Sonya telling Kano that she's going to give him like $3 million to go here, and she doesn't have like $1 million, let alone like she was living in a crap hole. So like, what makes you think that she's going to give him $3 million? So moving on. So we have these three people getting beaten by Liu Kang, and Liu Kang has God. What is the other guy's name? Kung Lao. There we go. I'm like, it's like Kung something. Yeah, Kung Lao, which is of course the guy that has the like the bladed sombrero looking thing, because we end up having it to where Kano makes the joke about like, well, dude, I'm gonna take that sombrero and shove it up your butt, and so we have it to where Liu Kang and Sung and Kung Lao are like best of brothers almost, and so we end up having Liu Kang, of course, right away, like having this fire ability that he consistently uses. So we have it to where like when they're going down to the temple, we end up having Liu Kang with his hand all aflame. And I'm like, dude, they kind of completely and utterly just like skipped around about the whole like Liu Kang story. They're just like, oh yeah, Liu Kang, yeah, he's the best of them because like he's been like training with uh like Raiden all along. Like they gave him a backstory, but they kind of like rushed through it, like to make it obvious that it's like, oh well, people know Liu Kang's story. Like you don't need to like really go into Liu Kang's story, but also I guess you don't really need to care about Kung Lao either, because who cares? Uh, Really, eventually they end up like killing him off towards the end of this movie, to where I'm like, this guy is different from any of the other Mortal Kombat movies, and you kill him off. This is like kind of taking me off right now. That they ended up killing off Kung Lao, which is kind of a different character than we're used to seeing. But anyways, so we end up having to train these people on trying to morph, basically to showcase their powers. And so really we have it to where Liu Kang or Kung Lao tries to make them angry, or make them like make them try to figure out how they can like unlock their power. And so we end up having it to where Liu Kang and Kung Lao are just like, dude, I'm not even gonna like try to train Sonya because she's not the chosen one, and whatever. So we end up having, of course, like funny enough, I thought it was hilarious when Liu Kang was fighting Kano, and Liu Kang was just consistently tripping Kano consistently, to where he was just like, dude, I'm getting a little pissed. I'm getting a little ticked because you're like consistently tripping me. Like, is that the only move you have in your arsenal? And so, like, they're doing it on purpose because they know that they can anger this guy. That's the way to unlock his ability. Where reasonably for like Cole Young, it's a little bit harder to figure out exactly how to unlock his power, and so we end up having Kung Lao, who is trying to fight Cole Young, and that of course didn't really unleash any power. That just ended up cutting uh, Cole Young in the arm, and so Sonya has to eventually sew him up later on. So eventually they're all at dinner and they're going and eating egg rolls, and Kano asks for an egg roll, and we end up having it to where of course the fighters won't give him an egg roll, and so he gets ticked off so badly to the point of him getting a laser eye out of his eye, and then he's like, oh my god, I figured out my power. Oh, isn't that great, I got laser eye. Because we have it to where Kano is so excited about being able to have a superpower because that's all that mattered to him. And so eventually he found out that it was a laser eye, and he's like, oh, how great was that? So we end up having it to where eventually that Raiden decides to go uh, and teleport these people to kind of certain locations. Like we end up having Cole Young, who is teleported to go back home because it seems that his family is going to be consistently uh, having a threat of sorts. We end up having Cabal talking to Kano to say, hey man, like, you know what? Like the money that you're gonna make with Shang Tsung is like unbelievable. Like imagine your highest price that you can make a person uh like give you money and then like four times it or whatever. So we end up having Kano turning on, of course, his champions quite easily, which will lead up to Sonya ending up having to fight Kano because we just can't stop having tradition of Sonya fighting Kano no matter what. So we have Sonya checking up on Jax, and Jax is having like trouble, kind of course, like realizing that, oh my god, I have metal arms. Oh, that's too bad. But eventually, he quickly comes into his own. It has to, of course, fight uh, Raiko when eventually they end up getting separated. So we end up having Cole Young going out to see his family, and while that is going on, while he's trying to like hug his family and say like, "Oh yeah, this is all great," we have it to where Goro shows up, and so now like Cole Young now has to forcibly fight Goro, which I'm like, oh, of course. So Goro has to be in like every Mortal Kombat movie. There like has to be a Goro, and I think a lot of people love Goro anyways. Um, Goro, of course, is the four-armed guy that reasonably, when I reviewed the original, when I reviewed the Scorpion's Revenge movie, I just said, yeah, the four-armed guy, I don't know who he is. Because I couldn't, like, I don't think when I watched that movie, I could have figured out who all the people were. And like with the animated movies, it's really hard to find out who anyone is. Especially with like an IMDb thing, you're just like I either have to know these names or I don't. So we have Cole Young fighting Goro to really tell us that, like, oh, well, this is the Johnny Cage of this movie. To where eventually we have, towards the end of the movie, Cole Young is going off to Hollywood to find Johnny Cage, because we were assessing or assuming that Johnny Cage is probably going to kill off Cole Young, so that way he will be the champion or whatever of the next movie. So we have it to where Cole Young unlocks his power, which is basically the equivalent of Black Panther, where we have it to where, like, Cole Young's body becomes like armor and becomes like and has like kind of like these like Billy Club-esque like weapons, which, while Goro is consistently punching Cole Young, consistently hitting him as much as humanly possible, we end up finding out that that Cole Young is absorbing all of this power. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this is going to be like the wind-up attack, which eventually will go and take down Goro, which eventually it does. We end up having it to where eventually these like Billy Club things that Cole Young has, like, eventually like gets this like this red burning like thing to where eventually it's like, oh yeah, he's gonna easily take him down now, and surefire enough, like, it, that's what happens. We end up having it to where Cole Young's family ends up like taking their vehicle and like ramming Goro, which I thought was like awesome. But then eventually Goro like tears apart this vehicle and tosses Cole Young's family out of this vehicle because he's just that strong. So we end up having it to where eventually, so Cole Young takes down Goro, and woo, yeah, Johnny Cage replacement. But he doesn't have to like he doesn't have to knock him off a cliff like Luke Cage did, because how else could you have defeated that guy in the original movie, especially with just Johnny Cage's power. So anyways, we eventually push on to have Liu Kang eventually fight Cabal, and then he ends up having to forcibly fight him again, because I guess it's like, well, there was no real victory from this battle. Because eventually we have it to where Shang Tsung makes his way to Raiden's temple, and we have this talk between Shang Tsung and Raiden, on how like Shang Tsung isn't doing the right thing, how it's like it's not the tournament yet, and Shang Tsung doesn't care. Raiden tries to stall him using his power, blah 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 blah. So we end up having Cole Young coming back to now telling people, well, we need to fight off Shang Tsung no matter what. So I think it's time for us to have Raiden teleport us to certain locations to fight things off now. Like, we have to kill all of these champions off, because or they're just going to keep on coming. And so we have Cole Young, who is teleported to fight Sub-Zero because Sub-Zero had taken his family and is now back at that cage fighting environment that Cole Young had his origin thing presented by, whatever. And so while Cole Young is teleported to there, we have Sonya, who has to fight Kano, and we end up having Sonya eventually beating Kano, and she ends up getting her magical powers because she is now a champion of Earth because she beat Kano. So we have it to where Kung Lao ends up fighting Melina, and because Melina ended up fighting Sonya before, and she ended up like licking her sai and realizing that Sonya wasn't a champion, and so she ended up trying to uh, she ended up like trying to go away because she's like, dude, like I'm not gonna fight a champion that isn't really a champion. So moving on. So we end up having Kung Lao fighting Melina, and he ends up using his hat to like has a like a blade thing that like spins, and so Melina ends up just getting like chopped in half, which I thought was a really cool imagery, but because it just kind of looked cool. But eventually, we have it to where Shang Tsung just uh, just takes the soul out of Kung Lao, and then Liu Kang is like, no! So Kung Lao ends up getting killed and consumed by Shang Tsung, to where eventually I'm assuming Liu Kang in the sequel is going to go after Shang Tsung because first Mortal Kombat movie. So I'm assuming that this sequel movie is going to be exactly like the original Mortal Kombat movie, but they just wanted to gear this up to make it seem different, but it won't be different, so on and so forth. So reasonably, we have like Jax, who ends up finding Raiko. Which who do you think is going to win out of that? Jax, of course. Anybody else? They win their fight or whatever. Anybody who is actually important, like uh, Liu Kang, of course, beats Cabal. That's kind of a no brainer. So we end up having Cole Young, who goes off to fight Sub Zero. And of course, Cole Young cannot really do all that well to fight off Sub Zero. And so Scorpion makes his way back to fight off Sub Zero. And so we have it to where even Scorpion isn't exactly a perfect match for Sub Zero. And so we have it to where Cole Young and Scorpion team up to try and take down Sub Zero. And of course, wouldn't you think it, they succeed. We have it to where Scorpion really is doing most of the legwork because Cole Young is trying to unfreeze his family. And so we eventually have it to where Scorpion uh, eventually defeats Sub Zero, and eventually like consistently like talks with Cole Young, and then eventually he goes back to wherever he came from, and we end up having uh, Cole Young just with his family just going like, "Yay, we won!" And everybody realizes that like, oh, okay, like the Earth has won because of course the heroes have to win in the end. What is going to happen if Shang Tsung wins at the end of this? There's never another movie. Like I honestly think if they're going to do a sequel, I honestly think that the bad guys are going to win in the sequel because, like, if the heroes end up winning every single movie, like, I'm assuming what's probably going to happen is they're going to have Johnny Cage in the sequel, but they're probably going to kill him off just to tick people off. Like, hey guys, yeah, the character that you wanted in the sequel movie, yeah, we're going to kill him off at the end. Uh, because just to tick everybody off, because everyone loves this character, and uh, and we're hoping that that Johnny Cage was going to be in this sequel movie, but we're just going to put him in here just to kill him off. Is what I'm assuming is going to happen in the sequel, because reasonably in the sequel of the original movie they had Johnny Cage killed off, so that's what I'm assessing or assuming is just going to happen in the sequel movie. Is probably where we're going to go about this, because I can't think that Johnny Cage is going to be nothing but a character that's just going to be killed off in that movie. So yeah, so we have it to where once everyone wins, everyone goes their separate ways, and Cole Young ends up uh, mentioning that he's done with his rigged fighting whatever thing, and so he's gonna make his way onto Hollywood, and we end up having it to where like his coach is like, seriously, buddy, Hollywood? You think you're gonna make it there? And Cole Young is like, well, yeah. So we end up just seeing a giant movie poster of some movie that Johnny Cage is gonna do. Of course, we don't see the face of who this Johnny Cage character is because they want to kind of leave it to saying like, well, like we don't want to guarantee that this person is going to be in the sequel movie because we don't even know if we're going to actually do a sequel film. And so recently we have some crappy poster of some movie, uh, and so recently that's what really just ends the film is to have us like kind of hoping just like, oh, they're gonna do a sequel film, because I don't think that this movie's like, I could be wrong. I think there's a lot of die-hard Mortal Kombat fans out there that will watch this movie regardless. So I think there probably will be a sequel out of this. But I think it'll probably be a movie that'll go straight to streaming. I don't think it's going to be another theater release. Uh, I think a lot of people are probably already dream casting who's going to be Johnny Cage. Uh, I think reasonably it's going to be like a very cheap actor. Whoever it's going to be, it's not going to be like, oh my god, this character is amazing. Like I don't think whoever they pick, we're gonna go like I think he's gonna be a yet another nobody, uh, or somebody that's already been working with Warner Brothers, because Jax was the guy that was from uh like Supergirl. So I'm assuming like, oh, so they had to do something with that guy because I'm sure like Warner Brothers like contracts like everybody just like, oh well, like we need some kind of name in this movie that people are familiar with Warner Brothers, because that's what they have to do every time is to hire actors that they've already worked with. And so I'm assuming it's going to be somebody that they've already worked with. uh I honestly think it would probably be uh interesting if, like, I think a lot of people are already like figuring out who this would be, but I think it's gonna be just like whoever, because they're gonna kill him off by the end of the sequel. So, with that said, I am going to get out of here. I thought that this movie was just like meh. Like to me, I was like, it's nice to have another Mortal Kombat movie out there. But when looking at it, it still doesn't like it's still not better than the than Scorpion's Revenge. Like I think Scorpion's Revenge was better than the original Mortal Kombat movie, and so while watching this movie, I'm like, dude, it's still not better than Scorpion's Revenge. So with that said, I am going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.